Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 17th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the 2024 Senate elections. Now, my last prediction I made was all the way back in the month of May, and you know, and we all know, we were under very, very different circumstances back then, talking about not only the Senate elections, but also the presidential election, the House elections. Everything about the 2024 cycle had been so tremendously different, and now I'm excited to show you my first ever real prediction, now that we're in the real campaign season for the 2024 cycle with Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee. Now, I've been telling you guys for a while that I was going to start doing a 2-week series where every 2 weeks I was releasing a presidential prediction, a Senate prediction, and potentially some other predictions. I'll do a few topics on the House because I don't do an actual full-fledged House prediction. I don't really do presidential year governor predictions, but I will do them just 1 or 2 times so we can get a general understanding of the current state of the races. But the Senate elections are the ones that you will see in roughly 2 weeks from now, and every 2 weeks leading into the election of where we stand currently. And we do also have to understand these predictions are not meant to be projections for November. They are snapshots in time as to where the election, if it was held today, would look like, and that does give you a better indication as we get closer to the campaign season. But generally speaking, where we are right now may not be where we are in November, but also could be quite indicative. Now, a bit of an understanding, too, about my past with election predictions. In 2022, my most accurate election prediction actually ended up coming from 2021, one of the earlier on predictions where the numbers didn't look as bad for the Democratic Party. And that's because as the entire campaign season went on, it was very much built up to be this Republican wave year. And so we were talking about it from the lens of how much could Republicans do rather than could Democrats defend, and not only defend, but potentially expand seats in the United States Senate. Back in 2021, it looked far more likely than it did leading into 2022. And so that's why it's great to watch these over time and see how they really change month after month after month, and I guess now every 2 weeks, because it shows you that many of these races do in fact change over time, and that the races that could be blue today may be red tomorrow. Now, to give you also a bit more context of my last election prediction, this is where we were on our map here. Republicans had the majority at 51, Democrats had the minority at 49. Right now, Democrats have a majority of 51 to 49. That comes from states like Montana and Ohio and West Virginia. That builds them up to be where they are on this map. And so that 51 to 49 advantage that Democrats had and really maintain is something that is very fragile. The Democratic majority does not come easy, and it certainly would not come easy because of the fact that all of these seats that Democrats are going to be defending are states that Donald Trump either won in 2016 or in 2020. And beyond that, they have very little opportunity and very little room for growth, if at all, on a Senate map like this one. And so, again, this is all stuff I want you to understand because this Senate map here is probably one of the best Senate maps that Republicans could have been dealt in a cycle like this one. And back when it was looking like Trump was going to have a very solid victory, it looked a lot better for Senate Republicans than it does today. But at the same time, the margins here probably aren't going to see too drastic of a swing because of the fact that my last prediction was from May. But back in July, things would have looked even worse for Democrats than a 51 to 49 majority, probably somewhere around 52, potentially 53, maybe even 54. So historical context that I think is also necessary, and I hate to do this to you because I know you're here for the prediction. Promise you we'll get to that in just a few seconds, but I want to talk to you about 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022 because the consistent factor here has been the Democrats have had surprisingly strong results despite not so great other performances in these election years. Right? In 2022, Democrats lost control of the House, but they expanded seats in the Senate. In 2020, they were able to win Senate control, but lost numerous seats in the House of Representatives. In 2018, they did not have the most amazing showing because they didn't win Senate control, but they were able to maintain a lot of states that Donald Trump had won. And arguably 2018 was a blue wave year, so all around good news for the Democrats, but in 2020 and 2022, especially beneficial for the Democrats. And 2016 was arguably also a good year. They won in New Hampshire, though they did lose a number of competitive races like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina. At large, the Democrats did do well given that Donald Trump was winning many states that would have likely translated to down ballot victories for Republicans who were in large outpacing Donald Trump on the national level. So getting to our overall electoral map here, not electoral map, forgive me, I'm still caught up on the presidential prediction we did 2 days ago. We're talking about a Senate map here with 34, in theory, toss-up states. But here's the killer for Democrats. Republicans have 38 seats right now that are considered to be safe. And the reason why they're safe is because they're not up for re-election. There is no possibility the Democrats, in the wildest of circumstances, could get more than 62 Senate seats. The Republicans, on the other hand, have the opportunity, and again, not going to happen, but in their wildest circumstances, could get 10 more seats from Democrats this cycle, which means Democrats are, in large, playing defense in these battleground states. They're playing defense in their safe states because of the fact they have way, way, way more seats that are up this cycle, which is, again, why I believe that this map has been made for Republicans. Again, Senate maps, every third chunk of the United States Senate is up every 2 years, but this one particularly fell on a very, very positive year for the Republican Party. But it's starting to see that some of these results may not be going their way, and we'll be talking about that in just a moment. So Democrats at baseline should be hovering around, if we're characterizing in Maine and characterizing Minnesota. Looking at my last prediction, I mean, New Mexico could be argued based on some recent numbers we're seeing in the presidential race. I could see an argument being made elsewhere, but right now I would say, 42 Senate seats. Oh my gosh, that is not the tab I wanted to go to. 42 Senate seats is largely where I would characterize Democrats on a Senate map like this one. And the reason for that is because they are winning most of the states they hold. I mean, that is an undeniable factor of this haul. The Democrats do have lockdown control, even in some states that Republicans really want to fight for, states like Minnesota and Washington and Virginia and Maine, even all states that they either won in recent history or have been fighting for very close elections in recently. But Minnesota with Amy Klobuchar locked down for Democrats, Virginia with Tim Kaine locked down for Democrats, Angus King in Maine locked down for Democrats, and Washington not even competitive, but in 2022 Republicans were really hoping it would be. Trafalgar released a poll showing it a 3-point race in Washington, ended up being a 14-point race. So Republicans funneled a lot of money into Washington, a lot of energy and excitement, all for it to come up to absolutely nothing. So Democrats start off with roughly 42 states when you factor in all the states that they're going to win by a safe margin. But now you can start to see that even with all that taken together, they have a 4-seat advantage over Republicans have without winning a singular Senate seat on the 34 that are up this cycle. And what gets worse is the fact that Republicans are very much going to win in states like North Dakota and Utah and Nebraska, which is a special election here, going to the Republicans, and Missouri and Indiana and Tennessee and Mississippi. And the big one that really does damage to the Democratic Party is the automatic flip in West Virginia. Senator Joe Manchin, you might know him because he was a longtime Democrat, turned independent recently, but someone who had been very well known as a more centrist, moderate Democrat. Well, he decided he was going to retire from West Virginia. He's not going to run for re-election, had never lost an election prior to that either, and so many Democrats were hoping he would hold out for just one more term, that he would run and potentially win. But then Governor Jim Justice, the Republican governor of the state of West Virginia, decided he was going to run for the Senate seat, and then it was wraps. There was no possibility, and in the best of circumstances, that Joe Manchin was winning West Virginia. Why? Because in 2018, he practically ran against a candidate who held just a few rallies and wasn't really putting his all into the race, and only won by 3 points. In 2012, the last time he ran, he won over 60% of the vote. And so it was clear that with a combination of polarization and a combination of Donald Trump, that West Virginia had become too conservative for Joe Manchin. Against the right candidate, maybe, but against Jim Justice, absolutely not. So Joe Manchin decided he wasn't going to run. West Virginia now is an automatic safe Republican pickup, which means 47 seats for the Republicans, not 47, 48 is the baseline, leaving Republicans just 2 seats they have to win if they want to win a majority if Donald Trump is reelected, or 3 seats out of the remaining 10 if they want to win a majority if Kamala Harris is elected this November. So a lot of room for the Republican Party. Either 1/5 of the seats need to go red, or 3/10 of the seats need to go red. All around here, really, really favorable odds for the Republican Party at winning the Senate majority. And so here we are. Remaining 10 remaining 10 toss-up states this cycle here, 48 for the Republicans, 42 for the Democrats. And to honestly get this out of the way, just to straight off the bat, talk about the states that Republicans are going to win by what we call a likely margin, anywhere that is between 5 to 15 percentage points. These are states like Texas and Florida. Now, I will say, I do think Texas has a unique opportunity to be narrower than the presidential level. One thing that is ring consistent across the battleground state polls in the state of Texas is that Donald Trump outperforms Ted Cruz by roughly 3 to 4 points. Right now, I think Donald Trump will win Texas by less than 5. I don't know if I believe the numbers that say Ted Cruz is underperforming Donald Trump by 3 to 4 points in terms of what we will actually see on Election Day because of what we've been seeing on the Democratic side of the ticket. Colin Allred is a strong candidate. He's a swing state Democrat who has never lost a House election. He has a very strong past and a very strong story, but I don't know if we're seeing the Beto O'Rourke type of energy or enthusiasm that we saw and is necessary to even do well in the state of Texas, much less win it. And so there have been a combination of things that have made me think the Democratic Party, in many ways, seems to have dropped the ball on the state of Texas in the Senate race here. And I get it. For a long period of time, we were talking about how Democrats had no shot at the Senate elections, not even the presidency. So why would Democrats focus their energy in a state like Texas when they're defending a seat in Michigan, defending a seat in Ohio, defending a seat in Montana? Texas was on the last of the Democratic Party's priorities, and it clearly shows. I think we could be in for a different effect, where Ted Cruz actually outperforms Donald Trump, and I know that might be surprising, but I do believe this to be true. When you don't see people faced with a candidate like Beto O'Rourke, and even in 2022, Beto O'Rourke lost the governor's race by 11 points. The right type of Republican candidate can do very well in Texas, and Ted Cruz isn't that. But I don't think that Democrats have the right type of Democrat. Colin Allred was a very strong contender when he was running in the primary. It was clear he was going to have the narrowest of margins possible. But right now, I don't see him narrowing it up to 5 or 4 points. I think we're somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 7 points in favor of Ted Cruz. And I do think we're going to see what we saw in 2020, where down-ballot Republicans actually outperform Donald Trump in many battleground states. Contrary to what many people believe, that the presidential coattails are enough to bring Republicans over the finish line, I do think Republicans are going to exceed Donald Trump's finish line, meaning that Donald Trump could come up short in some states, while Republicans could end up winning them. In Florida, I think we're on roughly even with where Rick Scott and Donald Trump are going to perform. A 6-7 point margin is what I'm expecting there. Not much, really. Republicans have seen the race narrow in a very similar way to Texas. But again, it's all about where Democrats are spending their money, where the enthusiasm is going. And if Florida is actually a competitive state, there would be signs on the presidential level. I get it. Democrats want to fight for Florida, and they should. Kamala Harris, in theory, should hold 1 or 2 rallies in the state to get benefits on the down ballot level, the organizational level. You can't give up a swing state as large as Florida on the presidential level. Otherwise, you will never, ever win it again. At the same time, recognition that this cycle may not be the one to win it is what Democrats also need to do to narrow up the scope of their field of play for this upcoming Senate race across the board. And Democrats did that on the presidential level. They need to do that on the Senate level. And Florida no longer needs to be in that list of priorities. But with that, Republicans reach 50 seats in the United States Senate. And I know it's really difficult for for Democrats to see that and say, where is their pathway forward? And I will tell you that I do not think the pathway forward is easy by any metric. I think if Democrats are going to win nationally on the Senate level, it will require Kamala Harris to be the next president of the United States. Otherwise, I don't see it happening. I don't think this is the cycle that Texas flips blue. I don't think this is the cycle that Florida flips blue. It has been a long time since Democrats have won in either of these 2 states, over a decade, 2 decades in Texas. And so right now, Democrats have, sure, in theory, a closer possibility than the presidential race. Maybe, and I think that's pushing it for Texas right now, given what we've seen on the Democratic side. At the same time, I think we could be in for some very big shocks like we were in 2018 when the polls had said Ted Cruz was going to win by 7-8 points in Texas in 2018, and Beto O'Rourke lost by 3 points, less than 3 points. And so 5-6 point swing can translate sometimes to a Democratic victory. I don't think it will this cycle, but I do think Democrats are still going to fight for it. Anyways, spending too much time talking about Florida and Texas, that's my justification for the likely characterizations. Now, Democrats share their own likely characterizations. States like New Mexico, I think, are going to be likely blue. I think Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and I know you might be surprised. Wait a second. If Kamala Harris is only up a point in Wisconsin, how is Wisconsin likely blue? I think we're also seeing something similar where some of these more popular Democratic incumbents are going to far outpace Kamala Harris. That has been a consistent thing we've seen in some of these polls. When I said Republicans were going to outperform Donald Trump, I meant it in the states that they were going to win. But in the areas where Republicans are going to lose, they are getting decimated in these battleground states. In Arizona, they're down on average 8-9 points. In Wisconsin, they're down on average, 6-7 points. In Pennsylvania, they're down on average 10-12 points. Democrats are absolutely going to win Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and New Mexico, and arguably even Arizona by a likely margin based on what we're seeing right now. Because Kari Lake can't seem to win back this election, can't bring it. She's dropping in the polls. So is Dave McCormick. He's losing support, even when it was Biden on the ballot there. You saw Biden losing the state of Pennsylvania by 5. Bob Casey was up by 8. Joe Biden was losing the state of Pennsylvania by 2. Bob Casey was up by 12. Right? You were seeing massive swings in favor of the Democratic Party on the Senate level, and Bob Casey was coming out on top every single time. Same for Tammy Baldwin. Same for Ruben Gallego in Arizona. And New Mexico is not even really a target for the Republican Party. I do think we're in for a 6, 7, 8 point margin for Democrats in the Senate race there, bringing them to a 46-50 scenario, narrowing down to the 4 toss-up states, the truest toss-up states of this cycle of Michigan, Ohio, Nevada, and Montana for the Senate race. Imagine saying that for the presidential. We'd be in a very, very different situation right now. And so Montana, Michigan, Ohio, Nevada, the one thing they all have in common right now is that they have Democratic incumbents. 3 of the states have returning Democratic incumbents running for re-election. Jackie Rosen in Nevada, John Tester in Montana, Sherrod Brown in Ohio. But beyond that, Michigan actually has a pretty strong Democratic contender. But Elisa Slotkin isn't really taking it away the same way that many of the other swing state Democrats are. It's quite surprising, I'd argue, because Michigan typically is the state that is the most favorable to Democrats. Recent cycles, though, in the Senate races, not as much. And so it actually doesn't make, it doesn't shock me too much that Elisa Slotkin isn't on track for a solid victory. But I will say, she very much is the favorite, which is what I'm going to say right now. She characterizes the state by a lean margin. I'd also say the same for Jackie Rosen. I'm on the verge of making it a likely blue state. I will say a lot of the numbers here recently have been very promising for Democrats, but I don't believe it when Cook Political Report says she's up 18 points in Nevada. That never really makes sense to me, especially if Trump is winning 3 points statewide. I think Jackie Rosen is very popular. That is what her approval rating numbers show and her constituent services ratings show. But at the same time, I don't think we're on track for Jackie Rosen dominating the field, but I do think she wins by 3-4 points. I think it's going to be a close race, but I think she ends up on top, which is why I would give it a lean characterization. Same thing with Elisa Slotkin, who I think is going to win statewide in Michigan, bringing us to the final 2 states of Montana and Ohio. So, new data out of both states. What do we know? The states have certainly narrowed, and not in a way that is favorable for the Democratic Party. Back a year ago, Democrats were the favorites to win both of these states, and while it may not have made much sense, because arguably, again, looking ahead to November, we know Trump has a beneficial effect for Republicans down ballot in states that they have strong performances on any level. In this case, that would be on the presidential level. Donald Trump's going to win Ohio by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points. Somewhere in that range, 6 to 10 points. Maybe more, maybe less, but I would argue 95% of the time, we're in a 6 to 10 point range. In Montana, we're anywhere from 15 to 20 points for Donald Trump. That's a massive advantage for Donald Trump in Montana. And so what we started to see recently is that new data from very strong polls in the state have shown that Tim Sheehy, the Republican nominee for Senate here, is up sometimes 5, 6 points. I do think Jon Tester is going to narrow that gap a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think Montana at this point is a lean red state on the verge of being likely red. And I know that's really painful for many Democrats, but at the same time, this state was always going to go at one point. Whether it was 2018 or now, this is the cycle that it does, at least as it stands today. Because if you remember where we were 6 years ago, North Dakota was a toss-up, Missouri was a toss-up, Indiana was a toss-up, West Virginia was a toss-up, Tennessee was a toss-up. 5 states here had very competitive Democrats, 4 states here had incumbent Democrats, and all of them have now been lost for eternity, seemingly, for the Democratic Party. Montana is one of those states, too. I do think, though, Montana is redeemable for Democrats at some point. I think they could win a House race here this cycle, if not the next cycle. They could certainly win the governorship because they have recently. But on the Senate level, it's become a lot more difficult for Democrats, and Republicans played their cards smart. Dave McCormick was bad. Eric Hovde was bad, right? All these people, bad nominees. Carrie Lake was bad. These are bad nominees the Republicans put forth, which is why Democrats exceed in these states and do so well. They are doing really well because Republicans, combination of things, Democrats are popular in the states, but Republicans chose the wrong people. In Montana, Republicans did something right, and they're being rewarded for it with the lean red characterization in Montana. The final state I have come to characterize is the state of Ohio. Right now, call the race today. Sherrod Brown narrowly wins. And I put pause on that because I think that honestly, this is a toss-up. While Bernie Moreno has not led in any statewide poll in Ohio, I do believe this race is going to be far closer than many people who believe Sherrod Brown is on track for a strong victory expect. This race is in a state that Trump is going to win by anywhere from 6 to 10 points. And the cross-party voting in Ohio isn't actually as substantial as we might think. Bernie Moreno is sort of like the J.D. Vance of this election cycle. But we forget that J.D. Vance has now made it onto a presidential ticket and has been hyped up as someone who can appeal to Midwesterners. Bernie Moreno, I think, is very similar. He's a lackluster Republican who's going to make it by the skin of his teeth if he's able to do it, and then will be heralded as this amazing Republican senator from Ohio. In reality, Sherrod Brown is a very strong Democrat who may just succumb to polarization getting too far in a state like Ohio, where the cross-party voting does not exist in the way that it used to. In 2012 and 2006, Sherrod Brown had far better performances. And if you take a look, too, at the electoral history for Democrats in Ohio, they were winning Ohio twice under Obama and losing it by 9 points in 2016 and 8 points in 2020. It's very difficult to see how, in a state like that has shifted so tremendously to the right, goes through Democrats this cycle. Sherrod Brown is popular, and if that is the only reason he wins, if there's one reason he wins, it is because people like him. They don't necessarily like his policies. They don't necessarily like his party. The state itself is red, but Sherrod Brown is a unique guy, and he can win Ohio. But can he win it by a large margin? Absolutely not. And if he does win it, it will be by the narrowest of margins. Because I do think that a lot can change in Ohio over the next coming weeks, next coming days even, as we get more data and more of an understanding out of the state. But right now, the number's finalized. 51 for the Republicans, 49 for the Democrats. And so while you may not see a massive change from my most recent electoral map, I mean, really, you're only seeing Montana get more Republican and Arizona get more Democrat. I will have to say, what we already knew about the race is exactly what we know today. But some new data points have come to really inform our understanding of states like Arizona and Montana, and arguably even Ohio. While I do think a tilt characterization is the narrowest you can get, I do think that now Ohio is super tilt. It's a 51-49% chance of victory for Sherrod Brown. Back then, I would have said 60-40 and just narrowly winning by a point because Trump was doing well. But if we were talking about a map back in July, if I was just to throw us back to where we were under Joe Biden on the day he dropped out, I would have easily said Montana was going to be likely red, Ohio was going to be at least red, that Michigan was going to come down to the narrowest of margins, Wisconsin was going to be dragged down, Pennsylvania was going to be dragged down, Arizona would have been dragged down, potentially even Nevada would have gone narrowly red. I mean, the point that we were under Joe Biden being the Democratic nominee for president was a pretty bad one for Democrats. And so while we didn't have that direct point of comparison, because this is a map from May 24th, I do think that this map is more indicative of where we are today and where we are under a Kamala Harris presidency, under a Kamala Harris nomination, meaning that this map is probably one of the best Democrats will see for quite some time. It may improve, it may get worse, but as of today, I have the map 51 for the Republicans, 49 for the Democrats. Republicans win back Senate control, but very, very narrowly. And so thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.